In a previous tutorial, I demonstrated how to construct a frequency distribution in Excel using a COUNTIF function. Now we saw that when we had multiple criteria that cases had to meet whether or not to determine whether or not they fell into a particular bin, that became rather tedious. What we'll do instead is introduce the COUNTIFS function, that is an S added on to the end, and that will allow us to enter into one formula multiple criteria for judging whether or not a case belongs into a particular bin. I've already identified the minimum and maximum values as you see here. So the youngest person in this group of 17 students is 23 and the oldest is 40 years of age. I've already got a sense as to how the data actually play out and what would be a nice distribution or nice bins to use. So what I'll do here is now start to construct my frequency distribution. The first column here, I'll add the variable name. The second column, this is where the output or the frequencies will be reported. And I'll start to type in my bin levels. And the last one will be 40 through 44. I'll also add a total column here, or total value rather, I should say, to this column. Now move the cursor to the very first output cell for the frequency distribution. I'll start to type in my formula, always beginning formulas with an equal sign. Equal COUNTIFS is going to be the function. Left parenthesis to open that up. I'm going to select the data range, comma, and now I indicate the criteria, the first criterion that I will use. And what I want to do is choose data that or values that are less than 25 years of age. So since I will have a character information, that being the less than or greater than sign, I'll have to use double quotation marks for this criterion. If I was referring to a particular number or a cell reference, then I wouldn't need to use the double quote marks for specifying the criterion. But anytime you have any sort of character information for your criterion, you need to use enclose it in double quotation marks. So my criterion will be anything that's less than 25 years of age, less than the lower limit for the next bin, and then right parenthesis. And there are 6 students that fall into that range. Now let me go back up here, and I'm going to add in dollar signs before the 2 and dollar sign before the 18, because I'm going to copy this formula down into the next cell, and we want to keep the cell range where the data are the same. So let's go ahead now and click to highlight then up in the formula bar this formula. And now what I'm going to do is just merely add in a second criterion. The first one, we're going to change that. Now we want any case that falls below 30 years of age. So that's the lower limit for the next bin, the third bin in our list. Now I'm going to specify a second criterion, comma. I have to type in the data range again. The same data range, comma. Now I want to only include those cases that are less than 30, but also are greater than 24, which is the upper limit that we see for the previous bin. Hit enter, and there are 6 cases that meet both of those criteria. Copy that down again, and now I'm changing the lower limit. We want cases that are less than 35, that is the lower limit for the next bin, but also that are greater than the upper limit for the previous bin. So this will then apply both criteria to each case and ask, does the case satisfy both of these criteria? And I can actually have a wide range or list of criteria in any COUNTIFS function, but we just have 2 here. The 3 fall into that category. I'll copy this formula down to the next cell and change that, and that will be any case that's less than 40, that's the lower limit for the next bin, but but is greater than 34, which is the upper limit for the previous bin. Hit enter, and there's one person that falls into that category. And lastly, I can copy now that formula down, and let's just make it only one criterion we need, anyone that has an age above 39. And I don't need to have anything at the end here. And right there we have it. Oops, what did I do there? Oh, anything is less than 30, that should be greater than 39. That's my mistake there. Now that looks correct, and there's one person that falls there in that range. Now I will do a sum, add these up, and like I always like to do, let's dress this up a little bit. Right mouse button click, come down and select Format Cells. I want to add a border at the top of that. I'll choose a thicker border than the default on top of that cell, and now we see then our total is separated from the actual cell references above, the individual frequencies. Let's dress this up just a bit. I'm going to center all this information, make the frequency column a little wider, and there we have it, our frequency distribution using the COUNTIFS function. Now let's use the COUNTIFS function again, this time for a variable exam 1 grades. What I'm going to do here now is begin to construct my frequency distribution. So I'll put exam number 1 will be the label of variable. Frequency is what we're going to generate. And let's have my range to be 0 to 59.9. That would be an F perhaps. Then the range of 60, and I'll put 60.0. I'll keep it all in one decimal place, up to 69.9 would be a D. Typically 70 to 79.9, 80 to 89.9, and lastly 90.0 to 100. So that's going to be my exam number 1 bins, and I have 5 bins here, typical grades that you see, and I'll go up and make 0.0 just to be consistent. Okay. Now what we see here is the reason why I've taken my data or my bin levels out to the 10th is because my variable is measured out to the 10th. I have exams recorded to the 10th. What I'm going to do here is specify then the first criterion. First criterion is going to be formula COUNTIFS. Identify the data range, select and highlight, comma, and again, since I'm going to use a range here, I'm going to have to include the character either greater than and or less than sign, so I have to embed now that in a double quotation marks. So I'm going to have any value that is less than a value of 60.0. I could have just put in 60, but I'll keep everything to one decimal point here to be consistent throughout this example. Hit enter, and there's no one that we see here that has a grade less than 60, so no one failed the exam. That's a good thing. Let's go back up and modify the formula in the formula bar. And what I'm doing here is merely changing it from a relative reference to a fixed reference. So I'm going to copy this formula down into the cells below it, but I want to use the same data range, of course. Let's click now on the cell where I copied the formula to. And what I'm going to do now is change the criterion. Here it's going to be less than a value of 70. Let's also add into that another criterion rather. And every time we have a criterion that we include, what we need to do is also specify the data range for that criterion to be applied to. And I could have just added this to the end of what I had before, but I'm going to put it beforehand, before what we had initially. Now what I'm going to have here, my lower limit is going to be a value of 60, so I want all cases that are greater than 59.9. And what I've done here is added in, then we have to type in commas after each data range that's identified and each criterion that is specified. So what this is going to do now is select all cases that have values including 60 up through 69.9. Hit enter, and there are 2 people that fall into that range. Let me now copy that down to the next cell, and all I'm going to do here now is change the criteria we use. Instead, we want cases that are greater than 69.9, but yet that are less than 80. This is going to be the C range. And there are 5 people that fall into that category. Let's copy this down to the next cell, and again change from 69 to 79. We want cases that are greater than 79, but yet that are less than 90. And there are 7 students that fall into that range. Let's copy this down one more time. And now we only have one criterion to specify, so let me delete that second criterion. And this is going to be all cases that are greater than 89.9. Hit enter, and there we have our frequency distribution. Now let's add a total value here, and we should then see that there are 17 students here. If not, I've made a mistake somewhere in my formulas. There are 17. I always like to dress this up. Highlight the total value, that cell. Right mouse button, come down to Format Cells, and let's select a thicker border that I'll put at the top of that cell to separate that from the individual frequencies for each bin. Let me go ahead and bold then the labels for my columns, and let's go ahead and let's center those. What I can also do then is increase the width of my frequency column. And there you have it, a frequency distribution using the COUNTIFS function, which allows us to specify multiple criteria that are applied to one or more data ranges.